Hello and welcome to Scratch 3D Printing. In this video, I would like to make a tutorial on OrcaSlicers. It might not be the best one out there, but I will try my best. Let's scratch to this topic. I've been getting a few comments saying that, can I do like a OrcaSlicers tutorial or like just a quick walkthrough through OrcaSlicer? Because it's quite confusing for some people to use OrcaSlicers as like their first slicer. Because if you go from simple to advanced, it enables all the options and like it's crazy. What does this do? What does this do? And what does that do? When I first started using OrcaSlicer, I did get a little bit confused of OrcaSlicers. When I first started 3D printing, I used creality because that's like the most popular one and the most simple one to use. They have this thing called print speed. And what is that? Well, of course it's print speed. How would I not know that? There's like one main speed controller. So if you put 100 millimeters in that speed controller, it will adjust everything for you. It will adjust the outer wall speed, inner wall speed, infill speed, support speed, tiny gap speed, and all of that. But once I transfer over to OrcaSlicer, it does not have that anymore. There is no print speed options for you. You need to adjust little thing by little, like the initial layer speed, the rest of the printing speed, the outer wall speed, the inner wall speed. You need to adjust them manually by yourself. Even for the print quality, if you put 0.3 layer height, it does not adjust anything for you. You gotta adjust one by one, and it's just like so much information right there. But enough of me talking so much. Let's go into OrcaSlicer and I'll give you a quick tutorial of what I've been doing with OrcaSlicer and how I use it. Alright, let's take a look at OrcaSlicer. So if this is your first time using OrcaSlicer, you need to select your 3D printer. I believe once you open OrcaSlicer, it will prompt you to select a 3D printer. But if not, click create new project. Printer is up here. You click this icon right here, wait for it to load. Sometimes it loads very slow because it's gotta bring up all of the 3D printers. So for me, I got a K1 Max, so K1 Max right here. It has a 0.4, 0.6, and 0.8 nozzle. It does not have a 0.2 or a 1 millimeter nozzle. You can adjust it in the setting after you select your 3D printer. So click your nozzle size and click confirm. First, let's take a look at printer's setting right here. Basic information, printable space, printable area is your bed volume, which is right here, this by this. So if we click set, you can set your 3D printing size according to your 3D printers. So the K1 Max is 300 by 300 and it is default to that, which is nice. Excluded bed area, just put it to 0 by 0 because you don't want to exclude any of the printing area unless you are specifically doing something that you need to exclude the bed area. And your printable height is the z-axis, which the bed goes down. Nozzle volume, just leave it to 0 because we don't really need to mess with that. G-code flavor, if you want to use Clipper, you can use it. If you want to use Marlin or any other thing, you can adjust to that too. And all of these, we don't really need to mess with them. But the last thing you need to do is select your nozzle type if you want to. Hard and steel, undefined, or whatever. I don't really select this because it doesn't really matter which nozzle I use. It's just going to be the same printing profile. Machine G-code. Here you can change how you want your 3D printer to start and end. This is the default start G-code for the K1 Max. It's going to start print. It's going to home. It's going to set your temperature nozzle. It's going to set your bed temperature. So that is very nice. After your 3D printer has done printing, it will do the end print, which is in the G-code macro files of your 3D printers, which expands to many G-code. It will run all of that and end your print very nicely by lowering the bed and putting the nozzle to home position. Multi-materials, I have not messed with this or look at this because the K1 Max don't really have multi-material system and stuff like that. So I had not messed with this, so I don't quite know what all of these does. The extruder, size of your nozzle. You can change this to the size of your nozzle, adjust accordingly to your nozzle on your 3D printer. Here is the layer height limit. The minimum layer height is 0.08 for me and the maximum is 0.32. People say that you don't want to print exactly 0.4 millimeters, so I just leave it at 0.32 because 90% of the time I print with 0.2 millimeters height. Extrude offset, just leave it at 00. You don't want to mess with that. Retraction is when your filament retracts, but we can set this in the filament setting later on. Motion ability, speed limitation, I leave this as this. But if you want your 3D printer to print faster, you can adjust the X and Y of the acceleration, but 20,000 millimeters per second is quite high enough, so I don't mess with that anymore. Jerks, just leave the jerk at default. You don't really need to mess with them. Okay, so now let's go to the filament. So if you want to add more filament, you click this add one filament right here, and now you will have two. If you want to do multicolor printing, this is a really easy way, a really good way of doing it. You just do this, and then you select your 3D model and you paint them. Let me know if you want to see a video of me showing the paint system in OrcaSlicer, going step by step so that you will get a better understanding of what it is. But for this video, I will just go and look at the setting of what I change in OrcaSlicer and what each of the setting is. Type is the type of filament you are using, PLA, ABS, ASA, PETG, whatever you are using, select that as this one right here. To select the system preset for ASA, ABS, or any other types of filament and adjust it from there, it will be so much easier. For example, as right now, the printing temperature for my PLA is 220. I will go and select a system preset of ASA and it adjusts everything for me. Look at this, 260 now, 105 for the bed, max volumetric speed is at 12 now. Select that and adjust the print temperature, bed temperature, and the max volumetric speed according to the manufacturer of your filament type. Vendor, materials, support materials, you don't really need to mess with this. Default color, we don't need to mess with that. Diameters, yeah, if you are using a different diameter of your filament, you can adjust this, but most of the time we are using 1.75 millimeter. Flow ratio is the amount of extrusion flow that your nozzle is doing. So I calibrate mine and it's at 0.9776. So if you want to, you can go to calibration up here and do your flow test, but that is basically what it is. If you don't want to, leave it default, it works well enough. But the pressure event is when it prints fast and then slow down, print slow, and then print fast again. It has to be a consistent line throughout the whole thing. And I found that 0.032 is the best for my K1 Max. The density, you don't need that. Shrinkage, just leave at default. Price, you don't even need to mess with this unless you really want to get into the technical of pricing and stuff like that. Softening temperature, just leave it at 60 for PLA, and the recommended nozzle temperature, I just leave it at 190 at 230 because that's the range of most of the PLA filament. Print chamber temperature, if your 3D printer has a chamber temperature, then you can adjust this however you want. Same thing for active chamber. If your 3D printer has active chamber, printing temperature is pretty self-explanatory. It's the temperature of your nozzle when you are printing and extruding materials. And then the temperature for the bed, max volumetric speed, it's really important. If you set this to 1, it does not matter how fast you want to print, it will just print the max volumetric speed. So let's say I put this value at 1. If I go to the setting over here, the speed setting over here, and I put it to 300 millimeters per second, it will not do that because the max volumetric speed is 1. So it will adjust the printing speed to this max volumetric speed. This is very important. I just leave it at 23 for most of my PLA printing. So now let's go to cooling. Most slicer will put no cooling for the first layer because you want your plastic material to really stick on the bed for the best adhesion and without any warping or the model coming off midway through the print. Full fan speed at layer 0. It's at layer 0, but since you have this, it will override this and not do any fan speed at the first layer. Minimum fan speed threshold, these two are actually quite important. If you change this to like a 1 second, if you change these two to like a very low number like this, 10 and 1, you're gonna have really bad cooling because it prints so fast that it cannot cool down enough and you will have very bad overhang and you will have very bad print quality. After you print, you will look at it and it's like, what? This thing looks so ugly. It's like it's not even fully clear or like it's still melting or something. So just leave these two at default here. If you want to, you can even put the max fan speed threshold to like 8 or 10 to even have better cooling and to slow down your print a little bit more. Keep fan always on, yeah, just keep that on all the time. If you are printing PLA, if you are printing something else, just keep it off. And all of these, we don't really need to adjust them. The fan speed for the auxiliary fan cooling part, PLA, just put at 100% all the time. Exhaust fan is the back fan. If your 3D printer has a back fan, you can adjust these number how fast you want the fan to spin. Setting override. Retraction length is the amount of retraction your extruder do when your 3D printer changes place to print in a different spot. That's the amount of retraction length it's gonna do. Z-hop while retraction. This is just basically moving your bed down or move your nozzle up, depend on what 3D printers you had. If you have a Core XY, it will move your bed down, move your nozzle head to the correct position, and they will move back up, and then it will resume printing. If you had a bed slinger, it will make your nozzle head jump up, move to the correct position, and it will go back down, resume printing. Z-hop type is how you want the Z-hop to work. I'm not going to talk about these two are the only important stuff on Z-hop. Retraction speed is how fast your extruder is retracting your filament. De-retraction speed is how fast your extruder retracts the speed so that it can resume printing. And these things, I don't ever mess with them, so I'm not even gonna talk about them. It's like for more really advanced 3D printing, and you want to very fine tune to your liking. Advanced here is just the G code for your filament start and end. Multi-material, if you have a multi-material 3D printers or a system, you can mess with these, but I don't have them, so I don't really know these settings, so I'm not going to talk about them. Okay, well, that's the filament setting of OrcaSlicer. Now let's get into the settings for your print quality, strength, and speed, supports, and all of that stuff. Layer height is the layer that your 3D printing is doing layer by layer, so it's 0.2. It is very self-explanatory. Line width is how thick the width of your line is when your 3D printer is printing. First layer, outer wall, inner wall, top surface, sparse infill, internal solid infill, and support. Seam is where your layer starts and ends on the outside. Seam position is where you want your seam to start and end. And you have a couple options. Nearest, so it's gonna find the nearest spot. Let's say your nozzle print at the position 50-50. It's gonna print and it's gonna find the nearest closest spot to that 50-50. Let's say 51-51, right? It's gonna find the closest and it will put your seam right there. Align, it will align your seam as straight as possible so that it kind of hides it. Back, it will put your seam at the back of the model. But I found that online works best for all of this. Random, it will just randomly put the seam everywhere and it will look very bad. Stagger inner seam. So this is pretty much staggering the seam inside of the 3D printed parts. The seam gap is where it starts and ends. You can do millimeters or percent. If you do like 10 millimeters, it will have a 10 millimeter gap of the start and end of your printing. So I will show you right here the seam gap. If I put it at 10 millimeters, I'm gonna slice the plate, and as you can see right there, right? Look at that. We go down a little bit. Right here is where your nozzle starts printing. And if we go next, that is where your nozzle ends printing, and that is your 10 millimeter gap for the seam gap, which is very bad. So just leave it at 10%. It will end and start as close as possible, and it will give you a really nice seams right there. Scarf joint seam, I covered this in a video, so if you want to, you can go check that video. It will be in the description. Scarf joint seam is basically this. If you don't want to, you can put none, contour, or contour and hole. Scarf joint seam is just so much better. Just use contour and hole and leave it at that. You don't really need to explore that more. Conditional scarf joint, it is right there. Apply scarf joint only to smooth perimeters where traditional seam do not conceal the seam at sharp corner effectively. So it will just adjust your seam better. Just use it. And yeah, all of these is just the scarf joint. You don't really need to mess with these unless you really want to, because I found the default works really nicely. Position, I don't really mess with position, so I don't know what these are. I just leave them default. Ironing for the top layer, I don't do ironing, but if you want to, you can do on all top surface, and it will give you a better top surface because you iron them out. And sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't, but most of the time I don't, because the top layer is already good enough for me. And these two don't really need to mess with this. The wall generator, just don't mess with these, just leave them default and it will print fine. The more you mess with things, the more it's gonna break. If you want to, you can change wall printing order, inner and outer. You can do outer inner, but the best I find is inner to outer, because if you do outer to inner, you're gonna print the outer wall first, and it does not have any support, so it's gonna be worse than inner to outer. If you do inner and then you do outer, and have the inner wall to help support that, so it gives you a better wall finish. And like I said, all of these down here, we don't really need to mess with them. Bridging, I just leave the bridge at default because it works perfectly fine for me. Let's move on to strip now. The wall loop is the amount of wall loop that your 3D printing is gonna have, like this. 2, so it's gonna have 1 right here and 2 right there. So if we change this to 10, we slice the plate again, it's gonna have a lot more wall right here. Extra wall here, I don't really use this setting at all because you get this info error and it will change lots of things, so I just don't use that. I just adjust the wall loop here, so just do this and don't really mess with it unless you know what you're doing. Go ahead and do it. Top and bottom show, top and bottom pattern. So if I change this to concentrate the top layer finish, it's gonna look like that, which looks pretty darn cool in my opinion. The top show layer is how many top layers you will get. So this is 1, 2, and 3. So if you change this, you will have more top layer. The top show thickness is how thick you want your top show to be. Bottom surface is basically the same thing as top surface. These three are the same thing as this three. It's just the top and bottom. Infill, this is the amount of infill that is going inside your 3D printed part. So if I lower this number, it's gonna have less infill. Look at that. And the infill pattern, you can choose from all of these. 3D honeycomb is the best, so just use that. I don't mess with this, or this, and all of these. We don't really need to mess with them at all because, like I said, it works fine with the default setting. Events, we don't need to mess with this at all. It will just make it worse. I tried this and it does make it worse because I'm not quite sure how to adjust these. So just leave the events as it is unless you are more experienced and you know what to adjust. The speed, first layer speed. So this is quite important. This is the first layer that is printing and it's gonna print at the speed that you put this into. If you change this, it only changes. It does not change anything else, unlike Kira. The first layer infill, that's the blue thing. Initial layer travel, just leave it at 100% so that it's like the most efficient. Number of slow layer, I just put this at 0% because I don't really need to slow any of the layers. Outer wall speed is the orange line right here, is how fast you want your outer wall to print. Inner wall is the yellow line right here, is how fast you want your inner wall to be printed. Small parameters is like the teeny tiny small gaps that your 3D model has, so it's going to reduce by 50% of the outer wall. Small parameter threshold, I just leave it 0 because I'm not quite sure what this is. Sparse infill is the infill right here, so how fast you want your infill to be is the red line right there, 300 millimeters per second. Internal solid infill, so if you have a solid infill, it's going to print at 200 millimeters. Top surface, which is the very top surface here, it's gonna change speed according to your speed right here. Gaps infill, it's a gap inside your 3D models. For this, it does not have it because there's a perfect cube. Support, that's the speed for the support if you have support. Slow down for overhang, I just check that because it's just better to slow down for overhang. Classic mode, I don't check that because I don't know what I do. And checking that doesn't really change anything much, so just don't mess with this or this. These just leave them default, they will work fine. Travel, so it's how fast your nozzle head is moving, is traveling around your 3D model. So you can adjust that to whatever you're liking. Acceleration is how fast your nozzle head moves. So normal printing it's moving at 12,000 millimeters per second square. So I basically just leave these default because they're really good. If I just want to crank out part very fast, I will adjust these to 20,000. But leaving them at these has better print quality. Jerk is your 3D printing head. It jerks, right? It's just like jerk that back and forth and stuff like that. I don't mess with this, so I don't really know the in and out of jerk and just leave them default. Advanced testing, you don't really need this because I just don't mess with this, so I don't know what that is. And support, we will look at support right now. So if you enable support and if you have your models like this, it will generate the tree support or the normal support if you want that, but I love using tree and it will make this tree support for you so you can support your 3D printing model. The style, just leave it default because it works pretty fine. Threshold angle is the angle where it would start to generate support. So any angle that is 30 degrees or lower, it's gonna generate support. These two, I don't mess with them, so not quite sure. Raft layer, if you want to use raft, you can use that, but I don't use raft because it's very bad like this. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's very bad, so I just don't use raft. If you want to use raft, you can go to the other setting and use a brim. That is so much better than a raft. Unless you need the raft for support, I just leave them default. I don't really know what these two do. And events here, we don't really need to mess with the events unless you really want to mess around with your support and get it to be perfect. All you need to know is just this support up here and you are good to go for OrcaSlicer. Others, so a skirt. So let's say I want 2 skirts for this 3D model here. It's gonna print the 2 skirt on the outside first, and then it will start printing. This is good if you want to remove everything from your nozzle so that you get a better and cleaner print. Skirt height is how high you want the skirt to be. It's pretty much like a wipe tower, but it's a skirt. And this is the skirt speed. Print type, if you want to, you can use auto. Mouse ear, which is pretty cool, but I don't really use mouse ear at all. Mouse ear are that, it's just like an ear of the mouse. It does not print a brim throughout the whole bottom of your model. The gap object is this, is how far the brim is from your actual 3D printed parts. Prime tower, I don't really do that unless you need to do multicolor printing. So that's like a prime tower at the side here. So it's gonna prime and then print, prime and then print. Flush option, I don't do this, so I don't quite know what it is. Special mode, if you want to do something like, if you want to print this cube and then print this cube and then print this cube up here. So if you want to print one by one, you can go into the special mode and print sequence by object instead. If you click by object, it will print one object and then will go to the next object. But if you do that, you're gonna need to space them out quite far away. Slicing mode, not quite sure what slicing mode is. Intra layer order, I just leave it at that default. Sparse, if you want to print like a vase mode, you can use that, and it will print vase mode for this object with no infill, only the outer wall with one layer wall. That's a spiral vase. Smooth spiral, if you want to do that, it's gonna have a better, smoother spiral. If you want fuzzy skin contour, let's do contour fuzzy skin. It's gonna make the outside of your 3D printed model like fuzzy, so it's just non-consistent line, so it's not going in a straight line, it's like wavy, so you'll get this fuzzy skin look 3D printed part, which looks really cool. This advanced, I don't mess with them, so I don't know what it is. And then these things you don't need to mess with them at all. One last thing about OrcaSlicer is that you can change up here the line type. Filament, so if you have multiple color, you have multiple filament, you can check which is which. Like, let's say you want this half to be green and the other half to be blue. You can check here to see if it's exactly what you want. So the speed, here's a really important thing. If you use a slider down here, this window will pop up. It will show you the speed right here. It will show you all the position right here, X and Y and Z, and like that. It looks really cool, right? It shows you the speed. You can do the layer height, it's gonna show you the speed and layer height. Layer width, it's gonna show you the width and the speed, which is amazing. That's why I love OrcaSlicer so much. And even show you the flow rate of this. It's like flowing more, less like that. It's so cool. You can see it at the teeny tiny bottom down here. And you can change all of these, the fan speed, temperatures, layer time, and all of that stuff. You can see so much in OrcaSlicer. Okay, so now we talk with the preview of OrcaSlicer, the printer, the filament, the settings down here, and then this key up here. We're gonna go to device. So I got my K1 Max up and running right now. Hello, you can see my hand in there. So if you don't have this set up, you can do so by going to this Wi-Fi bar up here, connection. Click that into your IPS address. If you have a K1 series from creality, you can put the port number 4408 so that you will have fluid interface. Right here is your recently printed model, your thermals and stuff like that, extruder, heated bed, chamber fan, and stuff like that. If you lower this, the fan on the K1 Max will start running, so you can adjust all of these however you want, and it will show you the graph of the temperature right here, showing you how constant it is. Right here, you can home your 3D printer. If I click this, it's gonna home my 3D printer right now, and it's gonna make a lot of noise. You can go up and down, left and right, all of that stuff moving right here. You can force move your 3D printer if you want to, but I don't advise doing that. Motors off is where if you home it, your motors are on. If you click this, your motor is going to be off and you can move your printhead easily. And this is just the extruding length, extrude speed. You can click these two buttons once you're up to temperature about 180 degrees Celsius. During printing time, if you want to see how your 3D printer is doing, you can adjust these. And right here is all your macros like bed leveling, beeping, bed PID tuning, all of this amazing stuff. Here is your fan options. You can turn on your fan, you can turn on your fan, you can turn on the power, camp, bed leveling, all of that stuff. Turn on the light. And this is just your printer's limit settings down here. Acceleration, deceleration, stuff like that. I'm going to turn off the motor. shuts off everything. And OrcaSlicer, you can actually see your bed mesh, which is amazing. This is not the best bed mesh, but it works fine. And right here is where you can see your G-code preview when your 3D printer is actually printing something. Console is just what your 3D printer is doing. This is the G-code preview of what you're seeing when your printer actually has something to print. Jobs is all of the jobs that you have been doing with your 3D printing. As you can see, all of these I've been printing on the Cable Max. History is the history of what you have been printing at your Cable Max, and like this. The longest one I did is 9 hours, and total time I printing over 372 hours. Oh my gosh. 2, this is your bed mesh. You can clear profile, you can save, you can load profile, you can home all, you can do all these stuff. You can adjust the scale to see your bed mesh. Configuration, these are your configuration file. I don't really advise messing with them unless you know exactly what you're doing. The one I mess with is just the G-code macro because I just want the machine to do a little bit more different than what it is prone to do. System is just your system. You don't really need to mess with any of this. Setting is just the setting of here. You can go around and look at all of this, but I'm not gonna explain what every single thing here does because I don't mess with them at all. All I do is just come here to get the camera and that's it. And well, yeah, that is basically it with all of the features and things on OrcaSlicer. Yeah, I know it's not like the most in-depth video because I only talk about the stuff that I use and I'm very familiar with. So it's not gonna be the best tutorial out there for OrcaSlicer. It's just very basic stuff just to set things up and get it start printing. And hopefully this video helps you a bit. And well, yeah, this is my tutorial of OrcaSlicer, and I hope you understand it better now, and I hope it helps you a little bit. Those settings are the ones that I change the most and use the most, and like I said, I don't really touch any other setting because there's just minimum things that change with your 3D printing. And I think if you actually really fine tune in OrcaSlicer, you will get really good results printing. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe to this channel because more amazing videos like this are coming very soon. Comment down below, what do you think about this tutorial? Did it help you? Did it not help you? Did I explain stuff well? Is it bad and stuff like that? But yeah, thank you so much for watching, and as always, keep on 3D printing.